For years, the United States was ahead of China when it came to commercial engagement in Africa. By 2009, China had surpassed the United States, becoming Africa's largest trading partner. By 2013, trade between China and Africa stood at $200 billion, double that of the United States. In 2014, U.S. companies committed investments worth $14 billion in Africa. That pales in comparison to China's estimated $75 billion worth of investments on the continent between 2000 and 2011. While the United States still outspends China in its direct aid to Africa, China has been seen as much more adept in cultivating long-lasting strategies to advance development across the continent and improve African lives. Chinese companies have established a presence here, and Chinese state banks are seen as open to financing, while Chinese companies are among the lowest project bidders. African governments have been following the US elections closely, though they've not voiced openly their preference of candidates. What they are seeking from the next American president is a leader they can engage constructively and favorably on trade and governance issues. In the meantime, the relationship between China and the African continent continues to grow. Nagila, CCTV, Nairobi, Kenya.
Right, then let's try and peel back the fog, as it were, on exactly what sort of policies President-elect Trump will have towards Africa. I'm going to start with Daniel Rangers, who's live in Washington. Deji Badmus will join us from Lagos in just a little bit. But first to you, Daniel. I mean, before November 8th, the forecasts were for a fairly convincing win by the former Secretary of State. Clearly, that didn't happen. So what went wrong here? Are we looking at the start of a bottom-up overhaul of the polling industry, especially given the fact that now these are two huge events that we've completely missed, Brexit and the US presidential election?
Polls are based on previous experience. This election has been unprecedented. Therefore, it's fair to conclude that the polls were entirely inaccurate and incapable of capturing the mood of the American people. They have been exposed as a fraud. I think now you're going to see, as you say, a bottom-up inquiry into what's gone wrong with US polls. They were supposed to be incredibly sophisticated. Based on the latest data and analysis, that has failed. Second, what has also failed is the perceptions from the media, from pollsters themselves about the candidate Trump and the way that Americans who've supported candidate Trump were made to feel that they were lower down the peg than those who were supporting Clinton. And therefore, I think that many of the pollsters were not able to get accurate information about the intentions of American voters, and therefore, if America is going to grasp this nettle, they have to understand, particularly Democrats, that Donald Trump has schooled the American political establishment in political culture. He has schooled them on how to engage with popular people who do not feel enfranchised by the current political elite. Those are fundamental questions ahead for the American public.
Indeed. As candidate, Mr. Trump painted a very clear isolationist, I believe the word is transactional view of foreign policy. You give me X, I give you Y. But as president-elect, what exactly does that mean for Africa-specific issues? Tackling Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab in West and East Africa, for example. Immigration, tax reform with a view to closing loopholes used to move illicit funds into the US.
Well, let's take a deep breath and find out what kind of cabinet that Donald Trump will shape. He has shown a preference for people on the fringes of political elite culture, and therefore those who are likely to benefit from the top cabinet positions are people who have otherwise, not been part of the sort of Obama machine in the past and not part of the establishment Republican machine in the past. So there's a degree of uncertainty about what kind of government Donald Trump will propose. I think on security in particular, there's likely to be a little bit of the same, because Donald Trump, given the Republican majority in the Senate and the House, is not going to want to commit US troops in a conventional fashion. Therefore, the alternative is to do more of the same of what Obama was doing with regard to national security in Africa. But on the diplomacy side, you know, there's all to play for. It all depends on whether Donald Trump plumps for people who are political appointees, or whether he goes for the professional classes and tries to make up with the Republican establishment. Therefore, we'd likely see more continuity. But it's all to play for at this stage.
Indeed. As I bring in Deji Badmus live from Lagos, I just want to give our viewers a bit of background for the data that we're looking at, especially with regard to this next question. US-Africa trade is about roughly 2 to 3% of total US trade. So in that larger sense, it isn't much. Deji, Africa as a whole didn't feature in this campaign, much less in foreign policy issues related to Africa beyond a general backlash on immigration and security policy. What's the reaction been to these election results in Nigeria?
To be candid, Rama, the reaction has been that of shock and surprise. I would say quite a number of people in Nigeria here thought Hillary Clinton was going to nick it, that she was going to win the election. A lot of people didn't give Donald Trump a chance at all. And so that's one of the reasons why some people actually stayed all through the night watching, stayed glued now to their television sets, watching the whole process. But when the result was eventually announced, people were surprised, shocked, and some people have actually expressed sadness that Mr. Donald Trump actually won that election. But then Mr. Trump too has got his own supporters here, and some of them have been saying, well, that they are not surprised, that they had always known that he was going to win the election. But the general mood here is that of shock and surprise, Rama.
Indeed. Daniel, let's kick the ball into one of our favorite topics, AGOA. What's to stop President Trump from starting the process of terminating, much less even overhauling AGOA next year?
Huge bipartisan agreement on Africa policy that has signed in very large numbers AGOA into law recently, about a year ago. That is not going to change. We're going to get AGOA for another 9 years. However, Donald Trump has indicated that he's prepared to play tough, as you said, in a transactional way on trade. Everything to play for on trade now. So I expect moving forward, if the atmosphere continues to perpetuate in the way, America will be looking for a more transactional relationship with Africa going forward, a more reciprocated arrangement. But I think AGOA is now baked in, so it's not something that's going to happen overnight. This is a long-term trend, and it's a long-term goal of the American business establishment to establish much more favorable terms of trade with African countries that are doing well.
Indeed. One last question to you, Deji. Oil exports to the US used to be a huge source of revenue for years for Nigeria, but that's pretty much ended now. Is Donald Trump, from the perspective of the federal government in Nigeria, is Mr. Trump someone that Mr. Buhari can do business with and perhaps continue and expand defense cooperation, particularly in the fight against Boko Haram?
Well, Rama, it is very difficult to tell at this moment, but there are those here who say that we might see the United States coming out in full support now of the Nigerian government now in the fight against Boko Haram. Some people have said President Obama has not been very supportive and has been very soft, and so some people have actually been looking at the speeches Donald Trump actually made during the campaigns. As you know, of course, he adopted a very hardline stance now against ISIS and terrorism as a whole, and that he'll be going hard against terrorism. So the general the impression among some people is that we might see Donald Trump, coming out in full force to assist the Nigerian government to defeat Boko Haram. But then, Rama, we know that there's a whole wall of difference now between campaign speeches and actual governance, because we just have to wait and see when Donald Trump comes into office, he takes the reign of power, and then if he's able to deliver on all the promises he made, then maybe we would see the U.S. coming out strong now in support of Nigeria, giving Nigeria equipment now to fight Boko Haram, and probably adopting a very different and radical kind of approach now in terms of the support for Nigeria to defeat Boko Haram. But then we just have to wait and see, because, as I said, there's a whole wall of difference, Rama, between campaign speeches and actual governance.
Indeed, we'll leave it there for the time being. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your input tonight. Deji Badmus live in Lagos, and of course Daniel Rangers, as always, in Washington, D.C.